Back on Midday, and today we're joined by a special guest in our studio.
He's here to answer questions about the issues that directly affect us right here in Hampton Roads. Joining us now is U.S. Senator Mark Warner, and thank you so much for taking the time
Katie,
today.
thanks for having me.
Senator, a lot on our minds this midday. We're glad you're with us. First of all, you know, military leaders are meeting with the president as we speak. He's going to be addressing the nation about the fight against ISIL. How do you feel about the fight, how it's gone so far, and if we should take the next step, increase the force and put more boots on the ground?
I feel like with ISIL, this is the real deal. I understand why Americans are worried, and this is a group that you can't negotiate with. They have to be eliminated. I believe it's going to require a four-pronged strategy. First, we need to do a better job of who we let into the country. And the challenge, though, there's been a lot of political rhetoric about the refugee program. That's not where the problem lies. The problem potentially lies in the so-called visa waiver program, where people with European passports can come into this country with very little scrutiny. We've seen that the majority of the terrorists have been folks actually carrying French or Belgian passports. So how do we make sure if somebody has gone to Syria or Iraq and they carry a European passport, they receive extra screening, number one. Number two, we are going to need, and I say this as a former technology guy sitting on the Intelligence Committee, we are going to need to engage with the technology community in a more robust way, because so many of the new mobile apps that are being added at a rate of 1,500 a day to your iTunes store, almost all of them are end-to-end encrypted. What that means is even with a lawful warrant, law enforcement or the intel services can't penetrate the bad guys' conversations. And we can't simply legislate this away because so many of these new apps are being developed by foreign-based companies. We're going to really need a thoughtful conversation with the technology community on how we protect people's privacy, but also have access to the bad guys' communication. Third, and this is why I've been so concerned about some of the, I think, disgraceful comments made by certain political figures. We have 3 million Muslim Americans in this country. They have not been radicalized in the way so many have in Europe. That requires a collaboration with that community. I hear from law enforcement and intel services, the director of the FBI last week, how important this strong relationship is. And when you have some of the anti-Muslim rhetoric by Mr. Trump and others, that in many ways is a gift to the terrorists. Because if you are some 19-year-old in a basement and attempting to be radicalized over the internet, these kind of comments by political figures in this country reflect a kind of America that really is not America. And then finally, we are going to need, I think, additional, at least special forces on the ground. But we have this conundrum in Syria where the rebels that we back can't take out ISIL. The Assad regime, backed by Russia and Iranians, can't take out ISIL on their own. And in effect, our forces are fighting against the Assad forces, and it's a three-way standoff. We need to get Assad out of Syria so there can be more collaboration between the Russian forces and the guerrillas we back so that we can actually take out ISIL.
And Senator, speaking of Syria, you were the only senator who did not vote on whether or not to allow Syrian refugees into our country. Why did you decide not to vote on December 3rd? And then also, do you feel as though Virginia should welcome refugees with open arms like perhaps Canada has done?
I don't. I actually had a health issue and missed 5 votes that day. There were other important votes that I missed on that wouldn't have made a difference. For example, I strongly support making sure that people who are on the terrorist watch list don't have access to firearms and some of the gun legislation that we put forward. I would not put an across-the-board ban on Syrian refugees. I think what we do need is a stronger visa waiver program, and I'm part of bipartisan legislation to strengthen that. And let's look at where let's listen to the law enforcement and intelligence professionals where we have weaknesses in our system, not some of the over-the-top rhetoric and haranguing that in certain cases has been more about scoring political points rather than making our country safe.
So you would be open to allowing Syrian refugees
I would be
into
open
Virginia.
to saying we need to better review that program, but that review ought to be done by law enforcement and intelligence professionals, not done by certain political rhetoric. And what we do need is not only looking at the visa waiver program, but after the tragedy in San Bernardino, there's a so-called fiancé visa program. That needs better scrutiny. But let's look at where the problem is, not where some of the loudmouth rhetoric is directed.
Senator, you've made several visits to the Hampton VA in an effort to assess care for veterans here at Hampton Roads. And recently, the Hampton VA reported that it has improved wait times for those veterans trying to get that initial appointment. And now I think we're ranking near the top of the list of those who are getting quick appointments. But I talked with one veteran who said the problem isn't getting in to be seen initially, it's what happens after that. Do you anticipate any future reviews or investigations or assessments of healthcare overall at the VA?
Absolutely. And I was very disappointed that we ranked in Hampton at near the bottom of the list. And I urged, and the VA sent in a SWAT team to try to do improvements. We now have seen the wait times go down dramatically. I'm going to be back, though, to make sure that once you get that first appointment, making sure the second appointment is done in a timely fashion as well. That's where we need to continue to keep vigilance. And I've brought a series of actually private sector companies in to help assist in that effort, and the VA has accepted that help. Terribly important. But we also have to realize that when the Congress passed legislation to expand what's called VA choice, so that if you live beyond 50 miles and you want to get VA services outside the VA, we have way too many complicated programs with different payment schemes that frankly need to be rationalized. Our commitment to our veterans has to trump virtually every other commitment we make as a nation. They kept our country strong, they kept our country safe, and we owe both the health care and the benefits that have been promised. The good news is, in many cases, we have put additional resources there. There are still some implementation challenges, and I'm going to stay on it.
Now, here at WAVY, we've done some very in-depth investigations on the VA, the health care, and then also on the Veterans Choice Program, which you just mentioned. It's been in place for about a year now. Do you think that's working?
I think the Veterans Choice Program is a step in the right direction. The challenge is there are 4 different payment programs connected to the Veterans Choice Program. So if you're a doctor that wants to service veterans, it's enormously complicated. This program ought to be streamlined. There ought to be a single point of payment. I was a business guy longer than I've been a politician. Seeing inefficiency makes me crazy. Why I was so proud when I was governor. Virginia got named best managed state. That takes a lot of attention. I see a lot of cases, and in the VA, in one of these cases, where we don't have that same level of business efficiency. And the VA Choice Program, while well-intentioned, is one of those programs that needs a more efficient payment system.
Are you going to try to step in to
Yes,
some way?
Yes, we are working right now trying to engage the private sector as well as working with Secretary McDonald, the new VA secretary, not so new now, he's been over a year, on saying how can we streamline these different payment systems so that the doc provides the best care possible, but does it in the most cost-efficient manner as well.
Can we talk about our economy in Virginia for a moment? And you know very well that our economy is heavily dependent on the military. Can you tell us about any efforts underway that are showing results that are helping us to diversify our economy?
Well, let's step back, Don, for a moment and look first at what we can do in the military and then look beyond. In terms of the military, Senator Kaine and I, and working with the whole delegation, continue to see if we can even out some of the funding flows for ship repair. We had a great win for the region when we got the refueling of the George Washington. We've seen some of the layoffs projected. Those numbers go down, and then back in 2017, some of those numbers will go back up in terms of additional funding. Our hope is to try to give the ship repair business, Huntington Ingalls and the shipyards and others, a little more predictability. Why it's so important that we get this budget in place that we're fighting on literally this week and don't go through the stupidity of another shutdown or sequestration, number one. Number two, for our defense community, we got a good win recently where we got the cyber command from the Air Force, the Air National Guard that will locate at Langley. And as I look as a former business guy who did pretty well in the wireless industry, if I'm looking at 2 areas where I think Hampton Roads can be a national leader, one would be cyber, because of all of our various military assets we have in the region, the fact that we've got so many intel assets all across Virginia, and this is going to be an area that's going to have tremendous growth over the next 20 years. Why not take a lot of that modeling and simulation capability we had in the region, convert it to cyber? So cyber statewide, Hampton Roads particular. And then unmanned systems. I know some of the audience may say, well, what's he talking about? Well, yes, I am talking about drones. There's going to be a million drones sold this Christmas.
Oh.
People using them to, if you're a real estate agent, you use a drone. But future, you're going to have drones being used for monitoring agriculture, for delivery of packages, a whole series of things. I think it'll be as disruptive as cell phones were, and we won one of the 6 sites to test these. Why not build that equipment, test it here in Virginia, leverage Langley, leverage some of the other assets we've got in terms of driverless cars, for example, at Virginia Tech. As a former business guy, this is the area that I would get into, unmanned systems going forward.
If I could jump in real quick, if we could follow up on the drone question, and you're saying soon that we'll see drones all over the place. Anything on tap in Washington now to quickly regulate these drones once they take off after Christmas?
Well, what we're trying to do is the FAA has got a system out for these drones that are under 400 feet, that are just sold for kind of commercial usage or individual usage. But the FAA is chasing after this industry that's emerging. So there's at least going to be minimal registration. There are 6 states that were awarded the ability to test next generation drones. Virginia is one of those. And clearly there are a whole host of privacy issues that have to be dealt with. But I see the kind of sales going forward. I remember back when I got in the cell phone business back in the early 80s, and people thought, Warner, it's not going to be much of a business. Well, it transformed the way we live. I think unmanned systems, from drones in the sky to driverless cars to systems in the water, this is all going to be developing simultaneously. And in Virginia, we've got a lot of those development assets right here in Hampton Roads.
Senator, we have 30 seconds left. The government funded through Wednesday. Is this going to get passed, or is there going to be another stopgap?
I think we'll see another stopgap. The last thing I want to do is spend Christmas Eve with other senators. I think there is a recognition, even in the House, that from the crowd who sometimes wants to shut down the government if they don't get 100% of what they want, that would be the worst thing for our economy, and quite frankly, the worst thing in terms of sending a signal to the rest of the world. So I think we will get a deal done. I wish it sooner the better, though.
You don't think it'll be Wednesday, though?
I think it may go past Wednesday, but I do believe we will not see a shutdown by Christmas.
All right. Senator Mark Warner, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time
you.
today. We appreciate everything. And
Happy
you will
holidays,
also hear
everybody.
more. You'll hear more from the senator on WAVY News 10 beginning at 4 o'clock as well.